We were prepared for tanks, missiles, and armies. What we weren't ready for was baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire and men who thought sleep was optional. The Dren Dominion prided itself on being the galaxy's greatest military power. For centuries, their fleets had carved through resistance with precision and brutality, claiming world after world. When their massive armada arrived in Earth's orbit, they expected another routine conquest. Humans, after all, were a relatively young species, still bickering over borders and technology, barely beyond internal combustion. The invasion commander, High General Carix, anticipated victory in weeks, if not days. The initial strike was clinical, as always. Dren battle cruisers leveled strategic targets, military installations, communication hubs, and transportation infrastructure. Waves of drones were sent to pacify major population centers, capturing key cities with an efficiency that bordered on boredom. For the invaders, resistance was sporadic, as expected, and casualties among the Dren troops were negligible. Earth was falling, just as every other planet had before it. Then things started to change. It began in the forests of North America. Recon teams were sent to capture a small group of retreating human soldiers but failed to report back. A second squad was dispatched, their tracking drones picking up faint heat signatures in the underbrush. They vanished too. The third team found nothing but silence and a single drone feed showing an unsettling image, a crude pitfall trap lined with sharpened stakes, dripping with an ominous red liquid. The Dren weren't used to traps. They weren't used to subtlety. They weren't used to war being dirty. Carix dismissed it as an anomaly. He shouldn't have. Over the next few days, the reports grew stranger. An entire battalion disappeared in the deserts of Australia. Their last transmission shouts of confusion. The words, sandstorm, and ambush, barely audible before static. In the megacities of Asia, guerrilla fighters struck at night, blending into crowds by day, disappearing like ghosts. In rural Africa, Dren vehicles were found abandoned, their drivers missing, with crude but effective explosives leaving scorch marks across the hulls. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They weren't following the rules of war. They were hunting, and they were terrifyingly good at it. It wasn't just the tactics. The humans themselves were wrong. Unlike most species, they didn't seem to value the safety of their own lives. While other conquered races had begged for mercy or capitulated when faced with superior technology, humans were a contradiction. They screamed with fury, fought with abandon, and seemed to laugh at the face of overwhelming odds. The Dren began calling them the unruly ones in whispered conversations. But the term didn't capture the creeping unease that was settling over the alien forces. Carix ordered a full-scale purge. No longer interested in occupation or assimilation, if humans wouldn't play by the rules, they would simply be annihilated. Yet for every village they razed, 10 more fighters seemed to rise. They called themselves resistance groups, the Wolverines, the Iron Fangs, the Sons of Liberty. Their insignias were crude, their weapons even cruder. Repurposed tools, explosives fashioned from fertilizer, ancient rifles that seemed more dangerous to their users than their targets. But somehow, it worked. The first major setback for the Dominion came during the siege of Moscow. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Dren forces had the city surrounded, its defenders outgunned and outnumbered. But as the alien soldiers advanced, the humans set the city on fire. The blaze spread faster than the Dren containment units could handle, turning entire districts into infernos. Human fighters, their faces blackened with soot, emerged from the flames like specters, wielding weapons scavenged from fallen invaders. They didn't retreat, they didn't surrender. They pushed the Dren back, street by street, block by block, until the once proud invaders fled in disarray. Carix couldn't comprehend it. The humans weren't superior in strength or strategy. They were weak, disorganized, and outclassed in every conceivable way. And yet, they were winning. His frustration boiled over in a meeting with his top generals. These primitives lack discipline. They fight like animals, he roared, slamming a clawed fist on the command table. They fight like they have nothing to lose. One of his advisors murmured, almost to himself. The comment hung in the air. Carix dismissed the meeting, but the words gnawed at him. Perhaps that was the problem. The Dren fought for conquest, for glory, for expanding their empire. The humans fought for survival, and something deeper. something Carrick's couldn't understand. As the weeks dragged on, the Dominion's advanced weaponry began to fail. Them EMP mines planted by human saboteurs turned their sleek drones into lifeless metal husks. Thermal cloaking devices were defeated by humans who simply smeared themselves in mud or waited motionless in the cold for hours. Even their food supplies became a vulnerability. Human hackers infiltrated supply drones, redirecting shipments to resistance groups or poisoning them outright. The Dren had never faced such an enemy, one who adapted so quickly, who turned every weakness into a weapon. Then came the event that shook the Dominion to its core, the fall of the flagship Velon, orbiting high above Earth. It was the pride of the Dren fleet, bristling with weaponry and protected by the most advanced shielding technology in the galaxy. It was deemed untouchable, a symbol of the Dominion's power, until it wasn't. Human hackers infiltrated its navigation system, overriding safety protocols and sending it plummeting into the Atlantic Ocean. The crash created a tidal wave visible from space, but the true devastation was to Dren morale. If the humans could destroy the Velon, what else were they capable of? In truth, the Dren were already broken before the flagship fell. The humans had shown them something they'd never encountered in all their conquests. The raw, unrelenting chaos of a species that didn't just resist but reveled in defiance. The humans didn't just want to survive. They wanted the Dren to regret ever setting foot on Earth. Carrick stared out of the observation deck of his command ship, watching as yet another one of his transports exploded in the atmosphere. His claws twitched at his sides. He had underestimated these creatures. They weren't just another conquest. They were something entirely different, something the Dominion might not survive. Carrick tightened his grip on the edge of the observation console as the flicker of another destroyed cruiser lit up the distant atmosphere. His claws left shallow gouges in the metal, a reflexive expression of mounting frustration. The humans were winning battles they had no business winning. The Dominion's calculations, its endless simulations, had never predicted this level of resistance, let alone the possibility of outright defeat. "Commander, we've intercepted another transmission," one of his subordinates reported, standing rigidly at attention. "The humans are boasting about the destruction of the Velon. They're calling it, what was the term?" "A warm-up." Carrick turned slowly, his amber eyes narrowing. "A warm-up?" The subordinate nodded, his scales paling under the general's glare. "Yes, sir. They've broadcast the claim across all frequencies. Some of our troops have started refusing assignments near their territory. Fear is spreading. Fear among Dren warriors." Carrick bared his teeth, his frustration boiling into rage. Fear is a choice, and it's one they don't have the luxury of making. "Increase the rotations. Reassign them if necessary. But I will not tolerate this insubordination." The subordinate bowed quickly and left, leaving Carrick alone with his thoughts. He had seen countless battles, crushed innumerable civilizations. Fear was always an early sign of collapse, and that collapse would ripple like a disease if left unchecked. The Dren were proud, disciplined, but even they were faltering in the face of these humans. They had to adapt. Carrick summoned his tactical officers, laying out plans for a more aggressive campaign. If the humans wanted chaos, they would receive it 1,000-fold. Orbital strikes would no longer target military installations or infrastructure. They would focus on civilian population centers. Cities already under Dominion control would be purged to send a message. Every corner of this primitive planet would feel the Dominion's wrath. The assault began with brutal efficiency. From orbit, the Dren ships rained plasma fire on densely populated regions, leveling entire cities. The scorched ruins of London, Beijing, and Sao Paulo glowed beneath a haze of ash. Drone swarms hunted human fighters in the wilderness, and biological agents were deployed to resistance strongholds in key regions. But it didn't work. For every city destroyed, more fighters emerged from the rubble, their hatred growing like wildfire. Human leaders began openly daring the Dren to attack further. "Burn it all," one broadcast challenged, the speaker's voice crackling with defiance. "You'll find us waiting in the ashes." And they did. Dren patrols began vanishing with alarming frequency. Forests once deemed clear were death traps filled with improvised explosives and ambushes. Ruins left after orbital bombardments became labyrinths of destruction, where humans moved like shadows, striking without warning. The Dominion's forces, so dependent on structure and precision, floundered in the chaos. Carrick's patience wore thin. The humans weren't just resisting, they were humiliating him. His name, once synonymous with invincibility, was now whispered with doubt among his own officers. He needed a decisive victory, something to show his troops and the humans that the Dominion was still in control. The perfect opportunity came in the form of a high-priority human resistance cell operating out of the Appalachian Mountains. Intelligence suggested it was a hub for communications and coordination, the heart of the Resistance's operations in the region. Capturing or destroying it would cripple the humans' ability to organize. Carrick's personally oversaw the operation. Hundreds of Dominion troops were deployed, supported by heavy armor and aerial units. The humans would not escape this time, but when the Dren forces arrived, the mountains seemed lifeless. Scanners detected no signs of activity, no heat signatures or energy readings. It was eerily quiet. Carrax's instincts told him something was wrong, but he pushed forward. The Dominion didn't hesitate. Hesitation was weakness. The first sign of trouble came when the lead transport hit a buried explosive, flipping the massive vehicle onto its side. Dren soldiers scrambled to recover, but they were met with a hail of gunfire and arrows. Arrows from the tree line. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly, using the terrain to their advantage. Every step the Dren took was met with resistance, snipers picking off officers, traps collapsing supply routes, and relentless assaults from unseen enemies. Carrax himself led the charge into the human base, determined to end the fight. What he found wasn't a command center but a decoy, a hollowed-out cave rigged with explosives. The blast was deafening, and Carrax barely escaped with his life. As he staggered from the wreckage, his forces in disarray, a human voice crackled over the comms, hijacking the Dominion's secure channel. "Nice try," the voice taunted, "but you're gonna have to do better than that." Carrax clenched his fists, his rage boiling over. These humans weren't just fighting, they were mocking him. This wasn't war, it was humiliation. He knew then that the Dominion wasn't just facing a military challenge. They were facing something far more dangerous. A species that thrived on defiance, that turned every loss into a lesson, every victory into a rallying cry. And they were going to stop.